What's up YouTube, it's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and I'm back again with another video. Now, not too long ago I made a few videos explaining the 4 most overrated and underrated players in the NBA today, and I actually made a video dedicated specifically to Damian Lillard to explain how underrated of a player he is in the league right now. Now, if you missed those videos, make sure you subscribe and you can be updated on all the content that I bring to the channel, but also make sure you make your way to those videos as well once you get done watching this one. But to follow up those videos, I'm making 2 videos explaining the 4 most overrated players of all time and also the 4 most underrated players of all time. Hopefully you enjoy the videos and you come to some form of agreement with my list. And again, make sure you subscribe so you can be updated when I upload the 4 most underrated players of all time as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the video. Here are the 4 most overrated players in NBA history. First, we have Carmelo Anthony, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about why Carmelo is so overrated, simply because we're living in his career right now, and a lot of us do remember when a lot of people used to over-exaggerate his productivity on the court, but I will hit a few key points when it comes to Carmelo. Now, Melo was most known for his volume shooting, the productivity he brings to a team on the offensive floor, but when it comes to the offensive floor and what he actually does for a team, throughout his career that has been over-exaggerated. Even though he does put up a good handful of points, there are other ways to figure out how productive he is on the offensive floor that people tend to overlook. First, when it comes to his assists, he doesn't really pass that often. And crazy enough, he has some years where he actually turns the ball over more than he actually passes the ball. Right now in his career, he almost has a 1-to-1 turnover to assist ratio. And actually in Denver, he averaged 3.1 assists with 3.1 turnovers. So yeah, that's not all that productive. Also, when it comes to productivity and efficiency, Melo, when it comes to his field goal percentage and 3-point percentage, he struggled from time to time to be over 45%. Now again, being around 45, 47, heck, I'll even give you 43% is completely fine for a player who plays defense and doesn't turn the ball over that often, but Melo doesn't do that. And for a player who specifically spends all his time and energy trying to figure out how to become a better scorer, you would believe that he would be as efficient as possible, but that's not really the case. And finally, when it comes to Carmelo Anthony and his scoring ability, something that he again is known for, he's only led the league in scoring 1 time throughout his whole entire career and never averaged 30 or more points. Something that players like Kobe Bryant, Tracy McGrady, and even LeBron James is able to accomplish. And LeBron is not even really known for how great of a scorer he is. Oh yeah, and we didn't even touch on the fact that he doesn't really play that much defense. And also, when you continue to look down the line and what he's been able to do year in and year out in the playoffs, if he does make the playoffs, Carmelo Anthony's only made it past the first round twice in his career. And the last time he made the playoffs, back in the 2012-2013 season when he did make it past the first round, Carmelo Anthony, again, when it came to his efficiency on the floor, wasn't that efficient of a scorer. Even though he did average roughly around 28 to 29 points, it took him 25 shots to get there, shooting roughly around 40 to 41%. So again, wildly over-exaggerated to how productive he is on the floor, even though he doesn't really spend that much time and effort on the defensive end. Hopefully Melo can turn it around because he's still in the NBA and add more to his game, especially on the defensive end. But at this point, I completely understand why he wants to continue to go to the Olympics, so he can keep adding gold medals to his resume. So hopefully it's easier for them to make the decision if he's a Hall of Famer or not. Next up, we have Vince Carter, aka Vince Sanity, aka half man, half amazing, aka one of the craziest dunkers I have ever seen in my life. There are certain things that Vince Carter has done on the basketball court that still leaves me in awe. But as a rational basketball fan, I can clearly tell the difference between a player like Vince Carter and Michael Jordan. Unfortunately though, when it came in early in Vince Carter's career, a lot of people couldn't tell the difference. And actually, as soon as he came into the NBA, a lot of people started to immediately compare him to the one and only Michael Air Jordan.
Vince Carter does some things better than Michael did when he first came in the league. Vince Carter can stroke the three-pointer. Michael was a marginal perimeter shooter when he started off. Vince Carter blocks shots, leads his team in block shots, gets 6 rebounds a game, and has electrifying play very similar to Michael Jordan when he takes the ball to the basket. So it's not a comparison that's out of this world, really. There are similarities between the two guys, and you might even say Vince Carter has a little edge on the Michael Jordan who was a rookie.
Now, of course, this may be something that younger fans may not remember, but as we now know, that's completely blasphemous. The fact that people would come to a conclusion claiming that Vince Carter is quote-unquote the next Michael Jordan only a year or two after his career is quite crazy. But Vince Carter actually didn't disappoint. After his rookie year, he averaged 25.7 points along with nearly 6 rebounds, and on top of that 4 assists, shooting 46, almost 47% from the field and 40% from downtown. But again, as we all know, only a year or two in the NBA shouldn't justify the comparisons of Michael Jordan, especially when it comes to the fact that Vince Carter needed a mentality to match his talent to put him in that type of comparison. Not only that, Vince Carter started to plateau and decline fairly early in his career. After the messy breakup in Toronto, Vince Carter found himself with the New Jersey Nets, where a lot of people actually questioned if Vince Carter was the best player on the team or was it Jason Kidd. And a lot of people found the answer to that question later on down the line once Jason Kidd ended up leaving the team. See, when Vince Carter and Jason Kidd was on the team together, that last year, Vince Carter averaged 25 points with 6 rebounds and 5 assists, which is actually a pretty good stat line. But immediately the next year, Vince Carter started to post numbers that were more comparable to a role player than a superstar without Jason Kidd, posting up 21 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and then a year after that, 20.8 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists, and shooting worse from the field. And on top of that, it's not like he was old. I mean, the last year with Jason Kidd, he was only 30, and immediately the next year after that, he was 31. Unfortunately, past that point, Vince Carter kept bouncing around from team to team, again playing like a role player and never averaging over 20 points ever again in his career. So as we now know, those comparisons and those assumptions were completely over-exaggerating how well Vince Carter was as a player. But now, even to this day, I find people over-exaggerating how well Vince Carter was in Toronto. So let me clear the air with a lot of people. First and foremost, Vince Carter really and truly wasn't that successful when it came to wins and loss, actually only making the playoffs twice with his time with Toronto. And if anything, if you want to talk about what he actually did and his success with a team, I think it would be better to remember Vince Carter with the New Jersey Nets. Actually, if you look at his career numbers and his career stats and the win-loss between the Toronto Raptors and the New Jersey Nets, he ended up playing roughly the same amount of games, averaged the same amount of points, rebounds, and assists, but he actually got way more success in the playoffs when it came to New Jersey Nets than compared to the Toronto Raptors. Also, when it comes to Vince Carter, he really didn't achieve that many accomplishments outside of the All-Star game. He only made 2 All-NBA teams, and the highest place that he landed himself in the MVP race was 10th. He very rarely played at an MVP caliber level, even though he did put up a lot of points. But the biggest thing that really threw me for a loop is when I actually made my versus video where I compared all the decades and tried to make a team out of each decade to compare with one another. And a lot of people got upset that I didn't put Vince Carter in that list. Now again, let's be clear about something. Vince Carter wasn't a top 10, top 15, and barely a top 20 player in the 2000s era. I mean, to be completely honest with you, if certain players like Yao Ming and Gilbert Arenas stayed healthy, Vince Carter probably wouldn't even be a top 20 player in the 2000s.
If I had the ball running the fast break, Vince Carter was on one end and Jesus was on the other one, I had to throw it to Vince Carter.
Next up, we have Oscar Robertson, the Big O, the guy that's synonymous for averaging a triple-double. I know, how crazy is that, man? A triple-double for an entire season. That's really impressive, right? Well, not so much. See, if you actually go back into the 60s and 70s, you will start to understand how easy it was for you to average a triple-double once you start to break down the numbers. But before we do that, let's talk about what he was able to accomplish while getting the triple-double. See, back in the early 60s, it was fairly easy to make the playoffs. It was only 10 teams in the league, and 8 out of the 10 teams made the playoffs. So if you didn't make the playoffs, it really wasn't that impressive, whatever you were doing. And actually, the year that he averaged a triple-double, Oscar Robertson missed the playoffs. Not only that, towards the end of the 60s, leading into the 70s, the NBA started to add more teams into the league, which means it made it just a tad bit harder for you to make the playoffs. Unfortunately, that wasn't good news for the Royals and Oscar Robertson because the league started to expand from 10 teams to 12 teams, which made it virtually impossible for Oscar Robertson to make the playoffs. Even still, when it was 12 teams, they were still allowing 8 teams to make the playoffs. So even though your percentages went from 80% to a little bit smaller than that, Oscar Robertson and Jerry Lucas still had problems with making the playoffs. So in the 1967-68 season, the Royals end up missing the playoffs after adding 2 more teams into the league. I guess that was the deciding factor if the Royals were going to make it or not. And then after that, they added 2 more teams into the NBA, which made it even harder for the Royals to make the playoffs. And Oscar Robertson, regardless of what numbers he was able to put up, he just didn't translate into W's. But furthermore, when we talk about the numbers that Oscar Robertson was able to put up in the NBA at that point in time, again, it's not that impressive simply because of the way that the game was played back then. Shout out to Mike Zimba because he did a video similar to this explaining why Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game really wasn't that impressive, simply because the pace that was ran at that point in time in the NBA. I highly suggest you go check out that video, but unfortunately I don't think Mike really sold and made it very clear on why it's so important that NBA players back then had such a huge advantage when it came to numbers. So for example, back in the 1961-62 season, back in those days, teams averaged 71 rebounds, 23.9 assists, and teams were putting up somewhere around 118 to 119 points a game, which is ridiculous. To put that in perspective, in the 2006-2007 season, the league average was 41 rebounds with 21 assists, and teams were putting up relatively 98 to 99 points respectively. Also in that season, Jason Kidd averaged 13 points, 8 rebounds, and 9 assists. But if Jason Kidd actually played in the 1961-62 season, he would have averaged 15 to 16 points, 14 rebounds, along with 10 assists. So yeah, Jason Kidd has also missed a triple-double. And to be completely honest with you, it doesn't even stop there, because you can continue to use other anecdotal evidence to prove the fact that if any other player played in that point of time with that many possessions at that pace, then their numbers will be also astronomical. Kevin Durant in his MVP season, 42 points, almost 10 rebounds, 7 assists. Magic Johnson would have had 3 years where he averaged a triple-double, and his best year would have been when he averaged 28 points, 10 rebounds, and 16 assists. Kobe Bryant's 81-point game would have translated into 107 points back then. And remember that time where LeBron went off in the Garden? Well, back in those days, he would have put up 72 points, 12 rebounds, and 15 assists. But by far the best way to show you how much of an effect it would have if certain players played back then, look at Michael Jordan in his 1993 performance in the NBA Finals. In that final performance, he averaged 41 points, 8.5 rebounds, along with 6 assists. If you were able to translate those numbers to back in the 60s, Michael Jordan would average almost 58 points, 12 rebounds, along with 9 assists, which is by far the craziest thing in the world. So yes, Oscar Robertson did average a triple-double along with a lot of other things he was able to do, as well as everybody else in the NBA back in those days, but it's not like he was even able to accomplish much anyway. So even though he put up crazy numbers, if anybody else in today's NBA or in the 90s or in the 80s played back then as well, they also would have put up crazy numbers as well. So the fact that anybody could have done it with those many possessions should really take away the allure that Oscar Robertson has. And finally, we have Reggie Miller. Now, Reggie Miller is widely known for how clutch he was and a lot of great playoff moments against the Knicks, but I'm here to tell you that Reggie Miller honestly really wasn't that great of a player. First things first, Reggie Miller really wasn't that good of a defender. Also, when it comes to Reggie Miller playoff performances, they're wildly overstated because majority of the time the Indiana Pacers didn't even make it out the first round, and the times that they did, either Michael Jordan was retired or Michael Jordan was towards the end of his career. But even with all that being said, I think a lot of us do thoroughly understand that Reggie Miller really wasn't that great of an all-around player, and a lot of us just simply know him as the great three-point shooter that he is, and I'm here to tell you that he's not even really that great of a three-point shooter. Now, don't get me wrong, he's extremely efficient, he has his moments, and he is really clutch, but when it comes to his three-point shooting and what he was able to do on the floor, compared to today's NBA players, Reggie Miller really isn't all that impressive. And to be completely honest with the viewers, a lot of this may have to do with the fact that every single time I say that Stephen Curry is the greatest shooter of all time, somebody in the comment section for whatever reason will sit there and say, well, Reggie Miller, Ray Allen may have something to say about that. No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't have nothing to say about that. Because truth be told, Reggie Miller is not that great of a three-point shooter. Actually, when you take the time out to look at how many three-pointers that he made in his career and how long he stayed in the NBA, it's really and truly not all that impressive at all. See, Reggie Miller is widely regarded as the greatest three-point shooter of all time simply because he held the record for so long. When in reality, back in those days, especially in the 70s and 80s, when it first got into the league and was introduced once the ABA and NBA merged, the three-point line was really seen as a gimmick, and not too many players actually took too many shot attempts from behind the arc because it really wasn't fitting in the playing style at that point in time in the NBA. Fast forward where we're at right now, a lot of people shoot from the three-point line, and it's actually a huge part of the NBA today, which then leads to the demise of Reggie Miller, because in 10 more years, Reggie Miller will be lucky if he's still top 10 on that list. And as time continues to progress, more players continue to adapt behind the three-point line, which makes it harder to make an argument that Reggie Miller was that great of a three-point shooter when he starts to fall lower and lower on that list. I mean, at this point, we obviously know players like Stephen Curry, James Harden, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson will eventually pass him. And even looking at a player like Damian Lillard, who's only been in the league for 4 years and has already made over 800 three-point shots, by the end of next year, he's going to crack 1,000, which took Reggie Miller 8 years to accomplish. But what makes it even worse is that you don't even have to be an elite player. Certain players like J.R. Smith, if they continue to play for a few more years, they'll pass him. At this point in J.R. Smith's career, if he continues to have a season like he did last year where he made 200 threes, in the next 4 or 5 years, he'll end up passing Reggie Miller himself. Which means that J.R. Smith will pass Reggie Miller's record at the age of 35, even though it took Reggie Miller 39 to get as many threes as he did. So there you go, people, the 4 most overrated players in NBA history. Please let me know what you think about the list in the comment section below. Make sure you like the video if you did enjoy it. Make sure you subscribe so you can be updated on all the content that I put out, but as well as the underrated video that I'm going to put out in a few more days. And as always, thank you for the support that you have given to the channel. We're already past 20K subs, and I can't wait until 50K because I feel like that's right around the corner. And also, if you haven't seen my last video where I broke down Michael Jordan versus LeBron James, make sure you go check that video out as well. It's a very, very good video. I feel like it's by far one of my best videos I have on the channel. But as always, people, I'll see y'all next time, and peace.